Hey everybody. So I find when I record these type of lessons that they tend to go a little faster than when we're in class, and a lot of that tends to be the issue of not having to create support for people or help people and stuff like that. So what I recommend is if you are having difficulty follow along, then just pause the video or play it in halftime, which some people do, which makes it a little easier to follow along with what the class lesson is about. All right, so last week, I think we finished off with all of our authentication stuff. So we had an authentication helper, and I think we got to the point where we were able to fill out our form and submit it, and then it would submit to the update page, but we didn't actually update the database with any of the information. So let's take a look at that. I'm just going to boot up Windows here, and we'll get it into play. And I know we added all the authentication to our app so that certain things wouldn't show up, and so it created a better user experience. Plus, we also added some security into our application. This takes a few seconds to load here. Should have loaded it before I started the recording. All right, so right off the bat, I'm going to start with WAMP. Like so. Choose yes to start my WAMP server. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to Blackboard quickly. And actually, I'll pause the video while I do this. And then you guys can download that piece. So give me 1 second, I'll just pause. All set. So we're going to go to Weekly Learning. Scroll to Lesson 5. Click on it. And we're going to click on these Lesson 5 starter files. So those are going to download to our downloads directory. If you click the little arrow and choose Show in Folder, you'll see it's in the downloads directory, or you can just click Downloads here and that will take you to the same spot. So here we go. We have our Lesson 5 zip file here. I'm actually going to get rid of all of the files that are currently in here. Hold on, because I'm not sure which one I actually downloaded. Let me try that again. I'm going to go back and try this one more time. Yeah, it's called Lesson 4. So, because I zipped up the Lesson 4 folder, that's the reason why it's called Lesson 4. So I'm going to extract it. So extract all, but I'm going to change the, I'm just going to get rid of this Lesson 4 part. Actually, no, we'll just leave everything the way it is, and I'll click Extract. There we go. So we have our Lesson 4. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to right-click on it and choose to rename and change it to Lesson 5. Now you'll notice that I'm nested in the Lesson 4 folder. So if you go to Downloads, we're in Lesson 4, and I renamed this Lesson 4 to Lesson 5. And that's where our actual files are. So I'm going to right-click on this guy and hit Copy. Then I'm going to click on my W. Go to www directory, COM1006, and I'm going to paste this into here. And I'm going to rename mine, but you don't need to rename yours. I'm just going to rename mine to Tuesday. There we go. And I'm going to get rid of this extra one that I've got kicking around. Okay, so I have the Tuesday folder, so I'm going to open up my IDE. I'm going to open up my COM1006 with my Tuesday lesson in it, and I'm going to drag it and drop it into my IDE. And then I'm going to reduce the size because this is a little bit ridiculous. And there we go. So it looks like my IDE had an update. I've lost all my nice, wonderful styling. I'm just going to fix that. Start Visual Studio. Nice. Now I've got all my glows back, which is nice. Okay, cool. So when we finished off last week, let's just take a look where we actually finished off. So I've got my server running. I'm going to go and open up my browser, open up a new tab, and navigate to the localhost comp1006 folder. Then I'm going to click on my Lesson 5 Tuesday, and if everything's good, this should load up without an issue. We should be able to see everything we need. Okay. We hid the menu options that should not be seen when we're logged out, right? So when we're logged out, we shouldn't see profile, we shouldn't see users, and we shouldn't see logout. So we've restricted those by using some helper methods that we created in order to restrict what we actually visually see. So this is more of a user experience piece. If we log in, so I'll log in as asdf@asdf.com. This is my user that's just a basic user. I'm going to hit submit. We can see that I have the My Profile option. If I click it, it takes it to My Profile, and I have Logout. And those are really my only authenticated methods currently, right? We also made it so that the user couldn't just change the number up here. So the user is going to change it to 2, hit enter, and it kicks us back to the home page because we built a redirect in that says if you're not this user and you're not an administrator, then you're not allowed to edit this page or look at this page. Only administrators are allowed to look at profiles that are not their own. So for a generic user, it's pretty basic. There's not a lot going on. Let's log out, and we'll log in as an administrative user. So I'll log in as my Georgian College one. So here's my administrative user, and you'll notice I have a new folder called Users. I can click on that, and that gives me the ability to actually create a new user from scratch and also view all the current users, including a singular user's profile that's not my own, right? So this Eleonora Pajic is not me, I'm Sean McKinnon, right? So I can actually take a look at that. Plus I have the logout like the regular user has. So I get a few more features just under my user's profile that are more administrative because administrators can actually manage user accounts, which makes perfect sense. All right, so I'm going to log out. So just to prove that everything is working, if we're not logged in or logged out, we still can't do things like type the address directly in. So I can't just navigate to see all the users. I can't go to users show.php id equals 23. It won't let me. I'm not even able to navigate to, say, the users underscore form.php directly. Oh, I am. That's not good. We need to fix that. We should not be able to access this form. However, that being said, if I create a user in here, it should boot me back out anyways. Oh no, it's actually kicking me back to new and telling me that the email is not in a valid format. Oh wait, no, I should be able to access this form. No, that makes perfect sense because we can register a new user. But I can't access my profile and I can't access my users list unless I'm logged in as an authenticated user, as an administrative user actually. All right, cool. So all that is working. We had created these helper methods to make this stuff easy for ourselves. If we take a look at any of the users pages really, let's take a look at index. We can see that we have this very nice helper method that basically says if you're not the administrator, redirect to the base path, which base path will always be home for us. That's very handy and it reads nice and clean, so it makes our lives fairly simple. Okay, so all this is working. Our next step is to actually create an edit for our user. Now it looks like I have an edit page here. So I'm thinking we must have gotten through our edit. Oh, we did. Yeah, no, we were able to complete the edit. So we have the edit page. Did we do the form? Let's just double check. Yep, we've got our action logic in here that checks to see if action is set, and if it isn't, it uses the default base path. In the edit itself, there should be an action. Yeah, here's the action with the update form. So all that's in place. So if I go back to my browser, I'm going to log in as just my basic user. So here I am as my basic user. I'm going to go to my profile, and I'm just going to modify my link to say edit. And sure enough, I can't access the page for some reason, which is definitely not a good thing. We should be able to access the edit page at the very minimum. So obviously something is too restrictive, and it's causing it so that we can't access it. I think if we look, I think the issue will be our form is the problem. Yeah, we have a not a min redirect in here, which is not necessarily what we want. We don't want that if action exists. So if we're trying to edit, we don't want this to occur. So let's just put that in for now. We'll just add in is set $_ underscore action. So if $_ underscore action, actually we'll do this as an if, there we go, then execute that. So basically we're saying if it's not set, if action is not set, right, then we'll do the not admin redirect, which will check to see if we're administrator and we're authenticated. So all this will actually work for us. So that's good. That should at least allow us to access the page now. So let's refresh and we'll go to edit. Cool, now we can access it. So we fixed it. So now we can access our page, and you'll notice that it's pre-populating with all of the values for this particular user, user 23. And that's happening because in our edit page, we connected to our database, we grabbed our user based on the user ID, we wrote our SQL statement, we prepared our SQL statement so that this bound parameter would be considered as a literal value. We bound the parameter with the value of user ID that we're getting from here, and we made sure we cast it as an integer. And then we executed our statement, and then we did a fetch, which will return the first row that it finds that matches this statement. And we stored that into user. Cool, that's awesome that we did all that. Then we took our session form data, and we basically said, if this is already set, meaning that we're on the create page and we're actually sending the information back from the create page, if this is set, then we'll just reassign it. Otherwise, if this is not set, we'll assign our user that we fetched, which means we should have the user data when we're doing edits, but we should have the create post data if we hit an error when we attempt to create a user. All right, so that's cool. So we have all that in place. What else do we have? That's basically it. So now when we actually go and submit this user, we hit this blank page update, and we have the logic of the ID, the first name, the last name, the email, the password, and the password confirmation in there, and that's it. We're still missing all of the actual code for the update page. So we'll need to add the update page code now so that we can actually update our user. Now, it's important to understand, too, that even though we separated our form, right, to make things a little bit more common when we're trying to create a user or edit a user, because all that practice is basically the same, even though we did that, we still need to go through the whole process of creating a brand new action script. That's where update.php comes in, because we can't just send that same data back to create. It doesn't make sense. We'd have to add all this extra conditional logic to know if we were creating a user or editing a user. It makes more sense to just push it into this update.php. So update.php will still follow the same practices as create in the fact that it will validate, sanitize, and normalize all of the field data that comes back from the user. But it's also going to incorporate some stuff from show, where we're actually going to have to go and retrieve the user and bring them back. We're going to still create the SQL using bound parameters, and we're going to still redirect our user if they hit an error or they are successful. So our number one step is to validate, sanitize, and normalize this data that we're receiving. So let's go back to our page. We'll go to our update.php, and we're going to eliminate this var dump post. And our first absolute step will be to include the config file that we've been including everywhere that we need it, right? So we're going to include once, and I'm actually going to steal the logic. Oh, is that all we did? We didn't really make that difficult, did we? Okay. It's just // underscore config. Whoops, sorry. Config.php. So that will include our config file, and the config file contains all of our root paths, base path, some of our helper logic, all that stuff comes through in one go. The next thing I want to do is include the connection script, because we're going to need it. So we'll include that now, I guess, which is weird that I'm including it already, but whatever, that's fine. So we'll include root dot slash includes slash underscore connect dot php. I mean, we're not connecting yet. We haven't actually called the function, so we're probably fine anyways. Then last, we'll actually set up our session and start it if it isn't already started. So if session status is equal to php session none, so that will tell us whether our session is actually working, then session start. Okay, so if it's not running, we're going to start it. Next, we're going to create a container to store our errors. So we'll just create a simple empty array. Then we're going to run our first bit of validation. We're going to verify the fields, the required fields aren't empty. So last time we iterated through the post. This time we'll actually create a required variable that lists the fields that can't be empty. So first name can't be empty, last name can't be empty, and email can't be empty. Next, we'll loop through those using a for each. So for each required as field. So that's going to go through each one of these, and it's going to take this value and store it in this variable called field. We're going to check to see if it's empty. So if empty, $_post, $field. So the first time this runs, it will check to see if first name is empty, last name is empty the second time, and email is empty the third time. So if any of those are empty, then we're going to create a user readable version of it. So we're going to say UC, actually we're going to do string replace first. We'll do string replace. This is very similar to what we did in the, in the create script. We'll replace it with a space, and obviously we're talking about $field. Then we'll uppercase the first, actually we'll uppercase all the words. So UC words, and we'll just pass it formatted. And then we'll add the errors. Equals, whoops, we're trying to push errors on, so we'll do that. Use some string interpolation. Formatted cannot be empty. And there's our error. So if first name is empty, last name or email are empty, it will create those error messages and add them onto errors for us. So our next step is to validate whether or not the email is in the correct format. Verify the email is in the correct format. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to say if not filter var. So filter var will allow us to not only validate but also sanitize values. We'll pass it the value, and then we'll choose the filter we want to apply. So we're going to do validate email. So if this is not a valid email address, that's what this not operator is doing for us. If this is not a valid email address, then we'll take errors and we'll push on a new argument that says your email address is not in a valid format. Now this is a good time to actually return back to the user and let them know they have errors. Return to the user and inform them of any errors that exist. So first we'll count the errors. $errors and see if it's greater than 0. If there are, we'll access the form data. We'll create a form data key on the session, and we'll give it a value of the post. Then we'll grab the flash, create a field called danger, not error, sorry, danger, and we'll make it equal to the errors array. So we'll just store the errors array inside this associative array. Then we'll redirect. Actually, we can probably just do redirect because we created that wonderful function. And we'll redirect back to the new. So we're going to go to base path dot users new dot php, or sorry, not users new, users edit dot php. And we need to make sure we pass the ID that we came from to the same location. So we'll just pass in the $_ get. Actually, we'll grab it from post. No, we'll get it from get. That's yeah, sorry, we have to grab it from post. I think we created an ID field. We need to look at that form. Yes, we did. We created a hidden field called ID. So we need that field. So we'll add ID in here. There. So we're basically checking any of the errors we can check before we absolutely need to connect to the database. If any of those errors appear, then what we'll do is we'll just report back to the user and say, you have some errors, you need to fix these issues, okay? So we can go ahead and test that. We'll come over here. We'll hit refresh. It's probably not going to do anything. Yep, it's not going to do anything because everything is valid. So let's go back here. Let's take first name out and hit submit, and there we go. First name cannot be empty, okay? You may be wondering why we're allowing the password to be empty, and that's because we already have a password. What we'll do is if the user has decided to add a value to the password, we'll check to see if it's there. If there is a value in password, then we'll validate that the password and the password confirmation match. And as long as they do, we will create a new password. Otherwise, we should probably alert the user that those passwords don't match. So we'll add one more piece of logic in here. Actually, we'll do it right after verify email. Verify that password and password confirmation match. And that's not a hard thing to verify. It's literally if $_post password does not equal $_post password confirmation, then we'll add another error on. Your password must match the password confirmation in order to change your password. Because if it does match, we're actually going to change the password that they have in the system. So let's just go verify that that actually works. Yeah, your password must match the confirmation. If I hit submit, now it's just the first name. Hit submit, everything works. We're now at a blank page. So that's good. So basically our basic errors are all working. So that's all great. So now our next step is to go through our sanitization steps. So let's sanitize our email and our data points. So sanitize email. So we'll just store it right back in itself. So we'll do email equals filter var $post email. Only this time, instead of validating that's in the correct format, we will run one of the sanitizers, which will basically strip any illegal characters from the email address, any script tags they might have tried to stick in there, basically anything we don't want that could cause malicious harm or even just kind of garbage data, right? Any like trailing or preceding spaces, stuff like that. We should also do the same to our first name and last name. So we'll sanitize first and last names. And what we'll do is we'll just write a inline for each loop, which looks like this. So for each, we'll add the square brackets, first name, last name, as $field. So basically the same logic as above. $_post, $field equals filter var $_post, $field, filter, sanitize, and we want sanitize string this time. So what will happen is each time we'll pass in these labels into here. That will help us find and reference the key that's in the post, and then we'll set its value as the sanitized version of that field. So the logic's a little bizarre there, but hopefully you can understand what it's doing. So now that we've done all the sanitization checks, we're ready to get the user we're editing. That's an important step. So we're going to do $SQL equals select star from users where ID is equal to a bound ID. We'll create a statement variable equals to con prepare the SQL, and I just realized that we haven't actually created this con variable, so we need our connection. Con equals connect. Everybody will have the same function now as well because you've loaded my files. So everybody should have that function. Actually, let's just double check and see which one we're using here. Yeah, it's a function called connect. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't an iffy. We need to bind the parameters, so $stmt bind param, and the first piece is ID, the second piece is post ID. We're going to bind the post ID from our form, and then tell it that it needs to be a PDO param int. So it has to be an integer. Then we're ready to execute. So stmt execute. That'll execute the SQL, and then we're ready to grab the user equals $stmt fetch. So now basically what we want to do is verify we have the user. So we'll say if $_post. Nope, that's not what we're going to do. Sorry, my apologies. If exclamation mark $, or sorry, is set. No, just $user. Because what will happen is if this can't find anybody, user will be false. So we can actually use that to apply whether or not we have a user. You are attempting to edit a user that does not exist. There we go, just in case they tried to hack the form and edit a different user. Our next step will be basically to go ahead and actually apply the edits for our user. So right now we're just verifying that this user exists. Our next steps are actually to apply our edits to the different pieces of the user. We're going to basically merge up our stuff so that we have whatever details we need from this user and whatever details we have from our post so that we can get those all together. Just give me 1 second. I'm just checking to make sure everything's okay here. Yes, okay. So we verify we have the user. Our next step is attempt to update the user in the database. So we're going to go $SQL equals update users set first underscore name equal to first underscore name, last underscore name is equal to colon last underscore name, and email is equal to colon email. And hold on, I've got something weird. I'm trying to get it to scroll here. It doesn't want to scroll. Right. So that's the first part. The next part is we'll check to see if we have a password, and if we have a password, then we'll bind that as a parameter on it. So if $_post password, and basically we want to check to make sure it's not empty. So if password is not empty, then we'll append to SQL. So dot equals is literally concatenate and equal, so it will literally, that's our append. So that will append onto the end of this. We will append, comma space, password equals password, right? And then at the very end, we need to just modify this a little bit by saying space where ID is equal to colon ID. So we edit the correct user. And that should be everything we need. So our next piece, oh, actually, we do need the avatar as well. We should include that. So that's avatar equals colon avatar. Because if they change their email address, they're going to have a different avatar. Get the new avatar. And that's really just basically avatar equals http //api.adorable.io avatars, the size 300, and then our email address, $_post email square bracket. There you go. So that creates all of that. So that's our SQL statement to update the user. The next thing we want to do is actually prepare it. So we'll do stmt equals $con prepare $SQL. So that will prepare the SQL statement for us. Next, we're ready to bind all of these parameters, and yes, there's a whole whack of them. Especially considering some of them we need to actually modify, like the password, for example. If we have the password, we need to modify it. So why don't we actually adjust our if condition to do that? We'll add a curly brace to the end of this, and we'll close it out with a curly brace. And what we'll do is we'll create $_post password will be equal to password hash $_post password default password, I think is how that goes. Pretty sure that's it. We can double check with edit, or create, I mean. So let's just take a look at create. And we'll find where we did the password for this. I'm pretty sure it's the same. Oh, it's password hash and it's password default. So password hash and it's password default. There we go. So we'll create the password there if we need it. If we don't, then we won't wind up adding it. All right, so next, we're going to prepare the SQL statement. Then we're going to go ahead and bind all of these values. So I'll do this fairly quickly because we have done it quite a few times. So I'm going to use a combination of hints and shortcut keys to get it in there quickly. So PDO, param, string. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And one of them we might actually not need. Oh, I definitely don't need the bottom one. That's silly. The bottom one will be different. So this will be if not empty $_post, post with a capital T, password. Then we will create password. Otherwise, we don't really need it. This one should be last name. This one should be email. And this one will be avatar. Only avatar is a variable. Whoops. And basically that's it. So we're binding those 4 parameters. If there's a password, then we'll bind the password parameter as well. If there's not, then we won't bind it. Then we're ready to execute the statement, which will execute the SQL, and we can set our con equal to null. So we basically nullify our connection. Then last but not least, we need to actually tell the user they were successfully updated. So we'll do all of $_session flash success square brackets equals you updated your profile successfully. And then we'll redirect the user. What am I doing? Let's just use our redirect function. Redirect. And it makes sense to just send them to their profile so they can see the updated profile. So we'll do base path dot slash users slash show.php ID equals, and then their user ID. So let's do it this way. So $user ID. Now, incidentally, because we have modified the user, it's usually not a bad idea to fetch the user and then write them into, rewrite them into the actual database, or sorry, the actual session again. So update the session details, and that's not hard, and we can actually do that very, very quickly. We don't need to go through all the bound parameters because we have a fetched user, so we're controlling the actual data itself. So what we can do to do that, let's write this down. Fetch user to update logged in user details. Okay. Now it's important also that we pay attention to this because we don't want to do this if the user is an administrator and they're updating somebody else. We don't want to accidentally replace their details, right? This one will be redirect user upon success. There we go. So let's go ahead and fetch the user to update the logged in user details. So what we'll do is we'll do $user equals $con. So we can't nullify our connection there. So let's move this connection down. I believe it's exec. Yeah, it's exec. No, it isn't. It's not fetch. Hold on, I did write it down. It is query. That's the word I'm looking for. I'm looking for query. So what query will do, query will actually return back the result set that it finds. So whatever it's finding, it'll return back that result set. So query should return back that user. It might actually return back all of the users, but we can do a fetch, a simple fetch, to actually thin that out right after. So why don't we say this is STMT. We'll write our SQL statement right directly in here, which is select star from users where ID is equal to, but instead of like doing a properly bound parameter, we'll actually just put the ID right directly in here because we're controlling this data. We're not using the post data, we're using the user that we retrieved up here. So that's totally fine. Then after we do that, don't know why that moved, we will do $user is equal to $stmt fetch. And then that will fetch our single user. So just 2 lines instead of a whole bunch of lines. This is not something you do if this data that you're doing your search by isn't controlled by you. If it's controlled by the user, like in a post, then you don't do this. That's a bad thing to do. You only do this simple line if you're trying to grab a user back that you already have control over the ID and the data that's going in, and you don't need to worry about, accidentally fetching somebody that you shouldn't be fetching, using information from the user themselves, right? So make sure you kind of pay attention to those kind of processes. So, okay, cool. So that executes that for me. We get back our user. The next step is for us to assign it to the actual session user. So what we'll do is we'll just go session, we'll reference the logged in user, and we'll say equals $user. Now, however, we need to note something. If $user ID is equal to the current session user ID, then we will overwrite the user. If it's not, we won't bother overwriting the user. Okay? Only if they're equal to the same person. And we could actually do that check before we even bother with this whole process, which would probably make sense instead of doing a costly check against the database. So we'll paste this up here. We'll add that bracket in. We'll move all these inwards, and then we'll close it. So our final logic is this. So if the user ID is equal to the session user ID, and we're grabbing user ID from this user we fetched up here, then we're going to create the statement of select star from users where ID is user ID, and we're going to fetch that user back, which should be our brand new user that we created right here. Sorry, that we updated right here. If that's true, then we're going to go ahead and add that into our session. Right? So we're going to replace our user that's in our session so that all the data is the same. And then we'll redirect them back. Let's go ahead and see if that actually works. All right, so nope, not that. So I'm going to go here, here. Instead of ASDF, I'm going to call him Fred. Flintstone. Go. I'm going to leave the password empty for a minute, and I'm going to hit submit. So I'm getting an invalid parameter number. Number of bound parameters does not match the number of tokens. So what causes that issue is when I'm telling them that I'm expecting 1, 2, 3, 4 parameters, but instead I'm giving them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parameters. So for some reason, I'm giving them more parameters than they need, right? So my password was empty, and I'm giving them 4 parameters. First name, last name, email, avatar, password, and then we're binding the parameter of password. Does it give me a line number? On line 69. Right, because that's where we're executing. So I've got the wrong number of actual parameters. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, I see why. So because I said where ID equals ID, so I'm short 1. So let's add that last parameter. So it's $stmt bind param ID, and it's $_post ID, which we'll be looking for it to be a PDO param int. Okay, there we go. So now we have everything we absolutely need. So let's try that again. We'll just refresh and resubmit the form. You updated your profile successfully. Now their name is Fred Flintstone. So I can go back to edit, or we could just create a link here, which would make our lives a little bit easier to actually get to Fred Flintstone. Why don't we do that? We'll create a link on our show page. So let's go back to our page. Let's open up the users show.php. We'll scroll down so that we're in the same block as where our created at and our table is, and we'll come down just below the actual table itself. You know what? I'll collapse it so it's a little easier to see. So we'll come down to below the table. We will add a div. I mean, why not? Just an empty one. We'll create a link. And we can actually use the font awesome that we currently have listed here. So it's FA-pencil. There we go. And then I like to put a non-blank space in and write edit. So this forces a space here. I guess we don't really need it. We could just put space, right? We'll see if that works. All right, now I'm ready to add my href. And my href is going to point to base path slash users slash edit.php question mark ID is going to equals $user ID, like so. And that will be on our show page itself. And it's grabbing this information from, oh, I didn't close that off. There we go, that's better. It's grabbing this user information from the user we're using on our show page. So it's not anything that we don't have access to. So this will create a nice edit link for us. So now if I go back and I refresh, I've got an edit link now. If I click edit, it takes me to Fred Flintstone with this email address. Why don't we change Fred's password? So Fred's password right now is ASDF. So I will change it to test and I will submit it. It says my profile is updated successfully. I'm still logged in, everything's fine. I'm going to log out, log back in, asdf@asdf.com, and I'm going to try ASDF. Our combination attempted does not work, so I'll try test. Cool. So our password change also actually works. So now there is some issues here because this user, when they go to edit, they can actually, I think they can edit a different person. Oh, no, they can't. Yeah, no, we made it so they couldn't. But they could submit the form and edit a different user. So if I'll inspect the element. And we'll do a little bit of hacking. Not much, just a little bit. I need this thing. Pull this down here. All right, so here's the input. Here's the hidden input, and right now the number is 23. I'm going to change that number to 20 and hit enter. So now I'm ready to actually edit Fred Flintstone. I'm going to create Fred2. ASDF, submit. I updated this person's profile successfully. Who did we actually wind up editing? Let's go to my profile. We'll see. Oh, I don't know who we edited. So we need to log in as an administrator so that we can see whose profile we edited. So let's log out. Log back in again. I'm going to close this because that's annoying. All right, show ASDF, submit. I think I know whose email address we actually edited. I think we edited Sean McKinnon at georgiancollege.ca. Let's try test. Oh yeah, no, we've edited this person. Can't access it. Let's go take a look at how bad that hack was. We'll go to phpMyAdmin. I know it was user 20, so Let's go see who user 20 was. Dun, 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 dun. Fred2, Flintstone, asdf@asdf.com. So we have Fred2 at that location. That being said, I think we have more than one asdf@asdf.com now. Yeah, because we have this guy, asdf@asdf.com. So we've actually not only inserted a new user, we've also accidentally created two asdf@asdf.coms, and we actually overwrote one of the administrative users, right? So we need to fix this so that you can't accidentally insert two emails inside our update script. So we fetched our user already, so we have our user right here. So what we also want to do is make sure that that email address doesn't exist. So the only way we're going to be able to do that is by doing another check to see if we can grab the email address of that person that they're trying to work with. So yeah, so let's do that. So verify we have the user. We have the user. All right, so our next step will be to verify the email isn't already in use. So what we'll do is we'll do an if check that basically says if $user email does not equal $_post email, which makes sense, right? So if the email they're trying to submit does not match their current email, that's totally fine, right? Check and see if the email exists. So we have to do this whole thing all over again. So we'll do SQL equals. Actually, because we have the user already, we can get away with doing a nice handy little quick query, right? We don't actually need to do the whole thing because we have a user that we can actually access. Where did we access the user in the first place? Right here. So because we're controlling the data now, we don't need to worry about binding parameters and all the rest of it. So we'll just do a quick select star from users where email is equal to $user email. And then all we'll do is we'll just create a variable called $exists. Actually, we don't even need to do that. We'll just do it in line. If $stmt fetch. So in other words, if we were able to fetch a user, then $errors, whoops, equals that email is in use. Nice simple statement. When do we do our next check, though? All right, so that's totally fine, but we need to actually do our error check again. We haven't done an error check since up here. So I'm actually just going to copy this information and come down here below this stop and paste it in place. So if they attempt to register a user that already has that email address, then it will blow up. So that's the first check. So let's go and fix this one. So I will fix this. So it's sean.mckinnon@georgiancollege.ca. Now I'll go back to the login. Test. No, I still can't log in. That's fine. I don't care. asdf@asdf.com, asdf, we should be able to access that user. Okay, so now we're having a whole bunch of issues where we can't even log in. Why can't we log in? Let's refresh this database, make sure we're not missing people now. asdf@asdf.com should be asdf from what I can gather. asdf. Isn't it? Nope. Looks like we might have some issues where we have too many users that are under the same that are under the same information. Is there another ASDF in here? I don't see another ASDF. I only see the Sean McKinnon at georgiancollege.ca, who's an administrator, whose password should be ASDF. I mean, worst comes to worst, we can just grab one of these emails. They all have the same password. Their passwords are all test. So test, submit. There we go. We've logged in as Eleanor. That's totally fine. Let's go to edit. And let's attempt to change her password, or sorry, her login to asdf@asdf.com and submit it. Okay, so we have an access violation now. We need to check the manual that corresponds to your MySQL Server version for the right syntax to use near at blah 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 blizz at line 1 on line 54 of update. So it's having an issue with this email address, and I think I know what the problem is. The problem is that we're actually putting our query inline, and strings, when you're trying to validate a column against a string, it needs to be quoted. And because I didn't have it in quotes, it wasn't working. So we need to make sure it's in quotes. So we'll do that. We'll hit refresh, continue, and boom, that email is in use. So it won't let us use this email. Yep, won't let us use that email. Good, so we fixed that problem. That's great. But we didn't fix the fact that we can still create another, like we can still modify another user account by just simply submitting the email and changing the ID that is currently correspond to it. So we need to fix that as well, because the only person who should be allowed to do that is an administrator. So if an administrator is editing a user, then they should be able to fix that. So we'll actually write it right up here at the top, just after the config. And basically what we'll say is the same thing that we did essentially with create. If you tried to create a user that was not yours, it'll be the same logic. So let's actually take a look at that. So it is not a min redirect base path. Yeah, not quite. So it'll actually look like this. If you're not authenticated, or your $get, $post ID does not match your session user ID, and you're not an admin, and all that will have to be wrapped, because otherwise it won't work. This will say this or this and this. It won't read properly, so we wrap it in a set of parentheses so this gets evaluated properly. So if you're not authenticated, or your ID does not match your user ID, and you're not an administrator, then we're going to redirect you to the base path. So all the way home, because you did something wrong. So let's go back. Let's refresh this page. So if I try to change this and I hit 23, it just sends me back. So now if I go back to profile, go to edit, right click on any one of these fields and choose to inspect. Navigate to this hidden field in the form and go, I'm going to edit user 12. And I'm going to make them Goofy Louie at 123.com. Goofy Louie. There we go. And I'm going to change their password to ASDF, and I'm going to hit submit. And it redirected me back to this page, but not only did it redirect me, if I go back to here and hit refresh, you'll notice here's user 12. They've been unharmed. We have not modified their information because we redirected properly. So we thwarted any attempt to modify this if you're not an administrator. However, let's go see if an administrator can actually do things. So we have Sean McKinnon at georgiancollege.ca with the admin password. I don't know if I'm going to be able to log in as this person. let's try. Sean McKinnon at GeorgianCollege.ca, ASDF. Oh, I'm logged in. Great. So I'm going to go to Users, View All Users, and I'm going to modify Donnie Mann. So here's Donnie Mann. I'm going to click Edit. I can access Donnie's details. And Donnie's real name is Donnie Maniquin. There we go. And I'm going to hit Submit. And Donnie Maniquin has been modified. And we're looking at his profile right now. And if I go to Users, View All Users, I can see that Donnie's been changed. So our administrator can modify users, and our users can modify themselves. That's totally cool. I think that's a good spot to leave for this lesson and let you guys practice this a little bit. Destroy is only about 5 lines of code, so we'll do that next week. And then we'll be on to our parent-child relationships. I hope everybody had a great night, and I hope a safe night.